Welcome, friends. Today, we want to talk about the story of Beatrice Mwangi, a black woman from Tanzania who fled from betrayal clutching nothing but shattered dreams and a train ticket. Somewhere between stations, drained and devastated, she collapsed against a stranger, Kang Jae-seo, a ruthless Korean mafia boss. But when consciousness finally returned, she discovered herself trapped in a reality she couldn't comprehend, couldn't run from, and now his baby grows inside her. I want to be sure you're ready for the ride, so hit the subscribe button if you're new here, like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. Beatrice Mwangi remembered when joy was real. The kind of joy that made her grandmother's kitchen smell like spices every evening. She could still hear her father's booming laughter echoing through their modest home in Dar es Salaam, still feel her mother's rough hands gently oiling her scalp while humming old Swahili songs. At 20, cancer stole her mom, and within 6 months of each other, she lost her dad to a heart attack. She stood at 2 funerals watching relatives cry crocodile tears while calculating what they might inherit. Her uncle, her father's younger brother, had appeared like an answer to prayer. "Come to Seoul," he'd said. "I have a good business. You can work with me, start fresh, build a new life." Beatrice had believed him, because what choice did she have? Tanzania held nothing but graves and memories too painful to face every morning. The first weeks in her uncle's cramped Seoul apartment seemed manageable. Uncle James smiled often, talked about teaching her the business, promised she'd save enough money to maybe start something of her own one day. But promises evaporated like morning mist. The smiles became cold stares. The business lessons never materialized. Instead, Beatrice found herself scrubbing floors in her uncle's small import shop, running deliveries in neighborhoods she didn't know, working from dawn until her body screamed for rest while her uncle counted money and complained she wasn't earning her keep. She tried to stay grateful, tried to remember she was alone in a foreign country with barely any Korean language skills, no money, nowhere else to turn. Her parents' death had left nothing but debt. She was entirely at her uncle's mercy, and his mercy seemed to shrink with each passing day. But he was blood. Family had to mean something, didn't it? That belief shattered on a humid Thursday evening when Beatrice returned early from a delivery. The shop was closed, but voices drifted from the back office. Her uncle's harsh tone mixing with another man's deeper rumble. She moved quietly toward the storage room, not intending to spy, just trying to reach the small space where she slept without being noticed. Her uncle's words froze her blood. "I'm telling you, Park, the girl is useless to me. Eats my food, takes up space, moves too slow, complains with her eyes even when her mouth stays shut. And you know what the worst part is? My brother died bringing her back from some party. Heart attack at the wheel because she called crying about some boy breaking her heart. If she'd handled her own problems like an adult, my brother would still be alive." Beatrice's hand shot to her mouth, trapping the gasp trying to escape. Her uncle blamed her. The man who was supposed to be family held her responsible for her own father's death. "That's cold, James, even for you," Park said, though he sounded more entertained than concerned. "Maybe so, but I found a solution. There's someone Korean Mafia, very dangerous, very wealthy. He runs underground businesses in Seoul. He needs a wife to clean up his image, something about legitimacy and international dealings. He's willing to pay extremely well for a presentable foreign woman who'll keep her mouth shut and play the part. I've already brokered the arrangement. You're trafficking your own niece? I'm giving her a better life than she could ever build herself. The meeting happens in 5 days. He's sending someone to inspect her the day after tomorrow. It's done." Beatrice didn't wait to hear more. She backed away silently, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. Her hands trembled as she slipped into the storage room, closing the door so carefully it barely made a sound. A forced marriage to a mafia boss. In 5 days, her uncle would hand her over to a violent criminal who needed a decorative wife. And Beatrice would become property, a business transaction, a thing purchased and owned. Unless she disappeared first. Sleep was impossible that night. She lay on her thin mattress staring at shadows on the ceiling, her mind racing through impossible options. She had almost nothing. Just some bills she'd hidden from the occasional tip customers gave her, money her uncle didn't know about. It wasn't much, but it might buy her a chance. Staying meant becoming someone's possession. Running meant facing complete uncertainty. But uncertainty was better than captivity. By dawn, Her decision was made. She would vanish. She didn't know where she'd end up or how she'd survive. But she'd rather die free than live as someone's purchased wife. The next day dragged endlessly. Her uncle was out making arrangements, probably finalizing the sale of his niece like she was merchandise. Beatrice used every moment to prepare. She packed light. Just her mother's old scarf, a photo of her parents, 2 changes of clothes. She counted her saved money 4 times. Enough for a train ticket heading south, maybe enough to disappear for a few days while she figured out her next move. When her uncle came back that evening, his mood was disgustingly cheerful. "Someone's coming tomorrow to evaluate you. Wear something decent. Try not to embarrass me more than you already do with your existence." Beatrice nodded, eyes lowered, playing the obedient niece one final time. That night, long after her uncle's snoring rattled through the apartment, Beatrice slipped out like smoke. Her small bag pressed against her chest, her pulse hammering in her ears. The train station was chaos even at this hour. Bright fluorescent lights, announcements in Korean she barely understood, crowds moving with purpose she couldn't match. Beatrice felt microscopic and terrified and completely lost. But she pushed through the fear, found the ticket counter, bought passage south to Busan with shaking hands. The train departed in 90 minutes. Just enough time to become a ghost before her uncle realized she was gone. She huddled on a bench in the waiting area watching businessmen and students and elderly couples. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere. Beatrice had never felt more displaced. She thought about her parents, wondered what advice they'd give. Her mother would probably hold her and promise everything would work out. Her father would make one of his terrible jokes to ease her fear. But they were gone, and Beatrice was navigating this nightmare alone. When boarding was announced, she joined the crowd on numb legs, found her assigned seat, car 7, seat 24B, window side, and collapsed into it with her bag gripped like a shield. The train filled around her, a blur of faces and Korean conversations she couldn't follow. She was drowning in her own spiraling thoughts, too consumed to notice much until someone settled into the seat directly across from her. The man who took seat 24A commanded space without effort. Tall, powerfully built, dressed entirely in black. Expensive black suit, black shirt, even his watch was black and clearly cost a fortune. His face was all sharp angles and dangerous beauty. High cheekbones, intense dark eyes that seemed to see through everything, dark hair styled with casual perfection. He radiated control and barely contained violence. The kind of man who made people nervous just by existing. Beatrice made herself smaller, pressing into the corner by the window, trying not to make eye contact or draw attention. Men like that were dangerous. She wanted to be invisible. The train lurched forward, engines humming as they pulled away from Seoul. Beatrice stared out the window at the city lights blurring past, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. She was leaving the only place in Korea where she knew anyone, running from family who'd betrayed her, heading toward absolute nothing. The weight of it crushed down on her chest. She thought about her mother's gentle voice, singing while she cooked. Her father's massive hands that could fix anything. The way their small home in Tanzania had felt safe and full of love. She thought about her uncle's words, blaming her, selling her. She thought about the Mafia boss she was supposed to marry, some monster who saw her as a business tool. Tears came despite her resistance, sliding silently down her face. She turned harder toward the window, trying to hide them, but her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. The train picked up speed and Beatrice felt like she was leaving behind everything that mattered, hurtling toward a future with no shape or safety. Exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Days of fear and sleepless nights caught up all at once. Her eyes grew impossibly heavy despite the tears. Her head began to drift, seeking rest, seeking any escape from the chaos consuming her mind. Without meaning to, without even realizing it happened, her head tilted sideways and came to rest against something solid and warm. The man's shoulder. Kang Jisoo felt the weight settle against him and went absolutely still. He'd been reviewing reports on his phone, mentally preparing for the territorial dispute waiting for him in Busan. As one of Seoul's most feared mafia bosses, his time was measured in power and money. His decisions affected hundreds of people in his organization and influenced entire black market economies. He didn't do distractions. He definitely didn't do spontaneous physical contact with random strangers. Yet this young foreign woman had just fallen asleep on his shoulder. His first instinct was to shift away sharply, wake her with the cold ruthlessness that kept people afraid and respectful. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the tear tracks still visible on her dark skin, catching the dim train lighting. Maybe it was how her hands clutched that worn bag like it contained her entire world. Maybe it was the bone-deep exhaustion written across her features, the kind that came from carrying impossible burdens. Jisoo had built his criminal empire on calculated decisions, on reading people with lethal accuracy. What he read now was simple. This woman was running from something, and she was completely alone. He made a choice that surprised him. He stayed motionless, adjusted his position slightly to support her weight more comfortably, and returned his attention to his phone. If she needed a moment of peace, he could provide it. It cost him nothing. The train ride to Busan was several hours. Beatrice slept through most of it, her breathing gradually evening out, her desperate grip on the bag loosening. Jisoo found himself glancing at her more than necessary, cataloging details he normally wouldn't notice. The way her natural hair was pulled back but coming loose. The calluses visible on her hands, even in sleep. The frayed edges of her jacket. This was someone who'd known struggle. Someone currently drowning in it. When the train began slowing for Busan Station, Beatrice stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding her face as she remembered where she was. Then awareness crashed through and she jerked upright, her face flooding with absolute mortification. "I'm so sorry," she stammered in English, her voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. "I didn't mean to. I don't know why I—" "It's fine," Jisoo replied in perfect English, his tone neutral but not cruel. "You needed rest." She looked at him properly then, and he watched the exact moment she registered what he was. Dangerous, wealthy, completely beyond her world. Her embarrassment deepened and she turned away quickly, fumbling with her bag. The train stopped and passengers began the familiar shuffle of gathering belongings and moving toward exits. Jisoo stood, retrieving his black leather bag from the overhead rack with practiced ease. His men would be waiting at the station, his schedule precisely arranged. But as he moved toward the aisle, he glanced back at the woman who'd slept on his shoulder. She was still sitting, staring at nothing, looking utterly lost. He should walk away. He had business, territorial disputes to handle, an empire to maintain. Getting involved with a stranger's problems was illogical, potentially complicated, possibly dangerous to his carefully controlled operations. Yet he found himself waiting. When she finally stood and shuffled into the aisle, he positioned himself nearby, keeping her in his peripheral vision. The Busan station was massive and overwhelming. People flowing in every direction with clear purpose and destination. Beatrice stood near the main exit, looking around desperately as if searching for something she knew wouldn't appear. Jisoo watched from a distance as two of his men approached. Large men in dark suits who bowed respectfully. "Boss, your car is ready." "One moment," Jisoo said quietly, keeping his eyes on the young woman. She'd started walking toward the street exit, her steps uncertain and slow. He made another decision that defied his usual ruthless logic. "Follow her. Don't let her see you." His men obeyed without question. Jisoo followed at a distance as Beatrice wandered out to the pickup area, stopping under the covered walkway, staring at the unfamiliar city beyond with an expression mixing terror and hopelessness. She had absolutely no plan for what came next. "Where are you going?" Jisoo asked, approaching her directly this time. She startled badly, spinning to face him with wide eyes. Recognition flashed across her features, followed by wariness. "Where are you going?" he repeated. She hesitated, clearly debating a lie. "I don't know yet. You have no destination." "I have no anywhere." The words escaped before she could stop them, and immediately she looked like she wanted to take them back. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. I'll figure something out. Thank you for letting me sleep." "I'm really sorry about that." She started walking away, but Jisoo spoke again. "Come with me." Beatrice stopped, turned slowly. "What?" "You have nowhere to go. I have resources." "Come with me." "I don't even know who you are." "You don't know me." "Why would you?" "Because you need help, and I'm offering it." His tone was matter-of-fact, like this was a simple business proposition. "I'm leaving now. If you want to come, get in the car." He walked toward the black sedan waiting at the curb, his men opening the door smoothly. Jisoo slid into the back seat and waited, his expression unreadable. He told himself it was strategic pragmatism. She clearly needed assistance, and he had resources to spare. It was no different than any other calculated decision. But he also knew that wasn't entirely true. Something about her called to a part of him he'd buried years ago. The part that remembered struggling on the streets before clawing his way to power. The part that remembered vulnerability. He'd built walls around that part of himself through violence and ruthlessness. But somehow this stranger had found a crack. Beatrice stood frozen on the sidewalk, every instinct screaming that following a strange, dangerous man was suicidal. But she also knew what waited for her alone on these streets. No money, no plan, no safe place to sleep, vulnerable to every predator in an unfamiliar city. At least this man had been kind on the train. At least he hadn't pushed her away when she'd accidentally used him as a pillow. That had to mean something, right? Or was she just desperate enough to rationalize anything? The driver started to close the door, and Beatrice made her choice. She ran forward, breathless and terrified and out of options. "Wait." The door paused. Jisoo looked at her through the opening, his expression revealing nothing. "I'll come," she said. "But if you try anything, I'll scream and fight." "Understood." He nodded to the driver, who opened the door wider. Beatrice climbed in, her bag clutched to her chest, her heart hammering so violently she thought he might hear it. The car pulled away from the station, merging into Busan traffic, and Beatrice realized she'd just made a choice that might save her or destroy her. She had no way of knowing which. Jisoo's home was nothing like Beatrice expected, though she hadn't known what to expect. A nightclub headquarters maybe, or some fortress-like compound. Instead, the car drove through increasingly exclusive neighborhoods until it passed through gates into a property that stole her breath. Traditional Korean architecture mixed seamlessly with ultra-modern security, creating something both beautiful and intimidating. Gardens surrounded the main residence, winter-bare trees standing guard. High walls. Cameras everywhere. "This is where you live?" Beatrice asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes." "Alone?" "I have staff and security. But essentially yes." He exited the car, and Beatrice followed on trembling legs. A woman appeared at the entrance, older and severe-looking, speaking rapid Korean to Jisoo. He responded briefly, then turned to Beatrice. "This is Mrs. Han. She runs the household. She'll show you to a room." "A room?" "I thought maybe just a couch or something temporary." "You'll have a room." He checked his expensive watch, a gesture Beatrice was starting to recognize as habit. "There's a meeting tonight. Underground business gathering I need to attend. You'll come with me." "What?" "No, I can't possibly. Clothes will be provided. You have 40 minutes. He was already walking toward another part of the house, pulling out his phone. "Meet me at the entrance." Beatrice stood paralyzed until Mrs. Han gently touched her arm, gesturing to follow. The older woman led her through hallways that felt like walking through a dangerous art gallery. Everything beautiful and expensive and vaguely threatening. The room she was shown to was larger than her uncle's entire apartment, with a bathroom that had heated floors and a shower with jets from multiple angles. "Shower. Dress," Mrs. Han said in heavily accented English, pointing to a garment bag hanging on a closet door. 40 minutes. Then she was gone, and Beatrice was alone in a Mafia boss's house, expected to attend some criminal gathering with a man whose full name she didn't even know. This was insane. She should run, escape back through those gates, take her chances elsewhere. But she was so exhausted from running, and something told her if she left now, she'd regret it forever. 38 minutes later, Beatrice descended the stairs wearing a dress that probably cost more than a year's salary. It was deep emerald green, elegant but simple, fitting her perfectly in a way that suggested either incredible luck or someone had very accurately estimated her size. Her hair was still pulled back messily, but she'd done her best to look presentable. She felt like a fraud, an imposter waiting to be exposed. Jisoo was waiting at the entrance, and when he looked up at her, something flickered across his dangerous features, too quick to identify. He'd changed into another black suit, this one with subtle patterns that caught the light. He looked like he belonged in movies about beautiful criminals, not standing in his entrance waiting for a homeless runaway.
You look acceptable, he said.
I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, Beatrice admitted.
Good.
Neither do I with this situation. He offered his arm, a surprisingly traditional gesture.
Stay close to me.
Don't speak unless directly addressed. If anyone asks, you're an associate visiting from Tanzania. That's vague enough to be safe.
Exactly.
The gathering was held at a private club in Busan's most exclusive district, in a venue that dripped with dangerous luxury. Beatrice had never seen so much concentrated power and menace in one space. Expensive suits and designer dresses. Jewelry that screamed wealth. An atmosphere of controlled violence and criminal privilege so thick it was suffocating. She felt desperately out of place, but Jisoo kept a steady, possessive hand at her lower back, guiding her through the crowd with predatory ease. People gravitated to him naturally. Other mafia bosses, corrupt politicians, businessmen with dirty money. All wanting his attention, his approval, his alliance. He navigated the dangerous social landscape with the same lethal precision she imagined he brought to criminal operations, giving each person exactly what they needed while revealing nothing of himself. Beatrice mostly stood beside him, smiling politely when introduced, saying almost nothing. She caught fragments of conversations. Territory disputes being negotiated. Money being discussed in amounts that made her dizzy. The subtle warfare of the criminal underworld playing out in polite exchanges and expensive whiskey. It was terrifying and fascinating equally. Sometime around midnight, Jisoo led her to a quieter corner where tables held elaborate displays of food and premium alcohol. He handed her a glass of champagne, then took whiskey for himself. You're doing well, he said. I'm not doing anything.
Exactly.
You haven't embarrassed yourself or me. That's success in this world. Beatrice sipped the champagne, the bubbles sharp and foreign on her tongue. Why did you bring me here? You could have just given me a room and left me there. Because I needed someone to accompany me and you needed clothes and protection. Mutually beneficial arrangement. That's not a real answer. He looked at her then, really looked at her. His dark eyes searching her face with unsettling intensity. Maybe I wanted real company. Not the performance everyone else requires. Before Beatrice could process that admission, someone called his name and he was pulled back into the dangerous crowd. She stayed where she was, sipping champagne that probably cost a fortune. Watching him work the room. He was magnetic, commanding, absolutely lethal. The evening blurred after that. More champagne, more conversations in Korean she couldn't understand, more marveling at a world she never imagined existing. At some point, Jisoo's hand found hers, warm and steady, anchoring her. At some point, she stopped feeling quite so terrified. They left the gathering sometime after 3 in the morning, both exhausted and slightly unsteady. The car ride back was a haze of champagne warmth and whispered half-conversations. Beatrice found herself leaning into Jisoo's solid presence. Her inhibitions dissolved by expensive alcohol and the intoxicating feeling of being protected, even if just for one night. He smelled like expensive cologne and danger. When his hand found hers in the darkness of the back seat, she didn't pull away. His driver pulled through the gates, and they stumbled out together. Jisoo's arms steadying her when she wobbled in her borrowed heels. They were both drunk, the world soft and spinning. Everything funnier than it should be. I can't remember where my room is, Beatrice giggled even though she knew perfectly well. This way, Jisoo said, but instead of leading her to the guest wing, they somehow ended up at his door together. She fumbled with the handle and when it opened, they both tumbled inside, laughing quietly. The laughter faded as they stood in the dim light of his bedroom, suddenly intensely aware of proximity. Beatrice looked up at him, her heart slamming against her ribs, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath stop. Not just kindness anymore. Something deeper, darker, infinitely more dangerous. Beatrice, he whispered, and then his mouth was on hers. Everything after that existed in fragments. His hands gentle on her face, her fingers tingling in his hair. Stumbling toward the bed. The world spinning beautifully. Whispered words in Korean and English she couldn't quite remember later. Skin against skin. Warmth and desperate need, and the feeling of being wanted for the first time in forever. Then darkness. Sleep. Blessed unconsciousness. Beatrice woke to sunlight stabbing through her eyelids and a headache that felt like her skull was cracking open. She groaned, pressing her palms against her temples, trying to piece together why everything hurt and why her mouth tasted like death. Then she felt the weight beside her, the warmth. Her eyes flew open and horror crashed over her in devastating waves. Jasot was lying next to her, his dark hair messed, his muscular chest bare above sheets tangled around his waist. Her dress from last night was crumpled on the floor, his shirt draped over a chair. The implications hit her like physical violence.
Oh God. Oh God.
What did we do? Her sharp gasp must have woken him. His eyes opened, confused briefly. Then awareness dawned across his dangerous features. He sat up abruptly, too quickly, wincing at what was probably his own headache. They stared at each other for a frozen, eternal moment. Two people realizing they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Beatrice started, but no words would form. Jasot stood abruptly, grabbing his shirt from the chair, his movements jerky and unlike his usual controlled grace. His face was carefully blank in a way that somehow felt worse than anger. "I apologize," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "This was inappropriate. I shouldn't have." He didn't finish. Just walked out, closing the door behind him with a soft click that felt like a door slamming on everything. Beatrice sat frozen in the bed, sheets pulled to her chin, staring at the closed door. Her hands were shaking. Her head was pounding. Somewhere underneath the physical misery was a deeper ache. The certainty that she'd just destroyed the one good thing in her life. What happened last night? What did we do exactly? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to remember, but the memories were foggy and disconnected. She remembered his kiss, his hands, the feeling of falling into something uncontrollable. But the details were lost in alcohol-soaked haze. Had she wanted it? Had he? Or had they both just been drunk and lonely and stupid? Beatrice pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them, and let the tears come. Silent tears that felt like they might never stop. She'd survived her parents' deaths, her uncle's betrayal, running away with nothing. But somehow this felt like the thing that might finally shatter her completely. 4 days later, Jasot asked her about her interests. They'd barely spoken since that morning. Both carefully polite, avoiding eye contact, pretending nothing happened. But when he asked what she wanted to do with her life in Korea, Beatrice grabbed onto the question like a drowning person grabbing driftwood. Maybe they could move past this. Maybe they could return to before. "Fashion," she said. "I've always loved designing clothes. Creating beautiful things." Jasot nodded once. "I'll arrange it." Within a week, he'd secured a small boutique space in a decent Seoul neighborhood, provided startup capital, connected her with suppliers. All businesslike and efficient, as if investing in her dream could somehow erase what happened between them. Beatrice threw herself into the boutique project with desperate energy, working 16-hour days. Exhausting herself so completely, she collapsed into bed too tired to think. Jasot helped with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. But there was distance between them now that hadn't existed before. They'd lost something that night, even if neither could name exactly what. Weeks passed. The boutique opened. Beatrice should have been happy. Instead, she was exhausted in a way sleep didn't fix. Her breasts ached constantly. Certain smells made her nauseous. One morning, she barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting violently, her whole body rebelling. The pregnancy test she bought 3 days later told her what her body already knew. 2 pink lines. Undeniable. Irrevocable. Beatrice sat on the bathroom floor, the test clutched in trembling hands, and sobbed. Great heaving sobs she muffled against her knees, terrified someone might hear. She was pregnant with Jasot's child. From one drunken night neither could fully remember. How could she tell him? The dangerous Mafia boss who'd saved her, who'd asked nothing in return, who'd been unexpectedly kind. He'd think she trapped him deliberately. That this was some scheme to secure his money, his protection. He'd look at her with disgust. Or worse, with cold calculation about how to handle the problem she'd become. She pressed a hand against her still flat stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing everything had changed. What do I do? What the hell am I supposed to do? Days turned into a week. The secret burned inside her chest, growing heavier with every shared meal.